Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So let me check my mic, make sure my sound is up. I'm seeing myself moving and shaking, so I'm going to assume that that means I am actually broadcasting. I'm going to try to go through this relatively quickly. It's just a basic argument. It's a very basic and simple and straightforward argument. But I have video evidence. And so I kind of want to go through the video evidence fairly quickly. First, Hard Bastard is going to be here on Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern. That should be an awesome fucking show. Also, I know I think Door is on at the exact same time, so I don't necessarily expect a large audience. So, that being said, I still wanted to do it while my energy was up to do it, so I'm doing the video. Andrew McCabe has been fired. Now, McCabe has been at this firestorm. The number 2 guy in the FBI at the time stepped down, but he was at a firestorm. Donald Trump tweeting bad things at McCabe, calling him essentially corrupt. What it boils down to is, it boils down to 2 things: the politics of it and what he's being fired for. Now, he's being fired 2 days before he gets his pension, meaning he's going to lose like $100,000 or more from being fired 2 days early. If he could have waited for 2 days, or if they could have waited for 2 days, he would have been able to get his pension. He's been at the FBI for like 21 years. The second part of the politics of it, his wife has received a massive amount of money. It's like $700,000 from Terry McAuliffe, which is, for all intents and purposes, a Clintonite. Donald Trump asked the question, wait a minute, how is this guy investigating me when his wife was getting all of this money from the Democratic Party or people associated with the Democratic Party? This doesn't seem fair. This seems corrupt. Now, the FBI looked into this and said, well, those things didn't take place at the same time, so they thought it was okay. I have to be honest, I agree with Trump on this. I don't even like Trump, and I kind of agree with Trump on this. Your wife is working with the Democratic Party. You should have recused yourself, just not to be a lightning rod in that case. Either way, that's not what McCabe is being put down for. Let me go through what McCabe is being put down for. And I want to pivot to a different argument, however, or a different conversation. But the conversation is being spurred by this. So, an Inspector General's report is going to come out. And that report is apparently going to be damning from the standpoint of McCabe. Now, McCabe stepped down, but despite him stepping down, here we are, this is one I wanted to use. There's a more updated version of this, but this gives it better than the other article that they have for today, and they're saying the same thing. Come on. What's wrong? What's wrong? My system isn't flipping over. Give me 1 second, guys. But that's bizarre. Okay, I'm not sure what's taking place, so I am just going to read it. Alright, this is the Washington Post. Yeah, I don't know what's taking place. Give me 1 second. Let me try to work this out real quick. And I will delete this in the actual video. Yes. And okay. I don't know what's going on, but I'm getting a bizarre result. Alright, so let's do this. Alright, I'm just going to show you this. I think I can just put it in front of my screen. Sorry, this is bizarre. Usually I have the system set up in a way where it gets the display screen. I can just pop over to see my other screen. For whatever reason, it is not seeing that screen. And because it's not seeing that screen, I am not getting my additional display. But I have an idea on how to get around that. Alright, so let's do this. This. Alright, and this. Right, here we are. Good. Alright, so you should be seeing this. Report said default number 2. FBI's number 2 for approving improper media disclosure, misleading Inspector General. The Justice Department's Inspector General was preparing a damaging report on former FBI Director Andrew McCabe, alleging he was responsible for approving an improper media disclosure, two people familiar with the matter said. One of the people said McCabe will also be accused of misleading investigators about his actions. The report is part of Inspector General Michael Hurwitz's broad review of the FBI and Justice Department's handling of the investigation into Hillary Clinton's use of the private email server while she was Secretary of State. During that work, Inspector General investigators found McCabe had authorized the disclosure of information to Wall Street Journal for an October 2016 story that examined feuding inside the FBI and Justice Department around the handling of a separate investigation into Clinton's family foundation. Two people familiar with the case said. That turned out to be true. Those probing the matter said McCabe, who stepped down in January, misled them when they initially inquired about the subject, though one person familiar with the forthcoming report said McCabe disputes that he intentionally misled investigators. It is unclear how McCabe is said to have misled them. The Inspector General's findings in the media disclosure were first reported by the New York Times. Through a representative, McCabe declined to comment. A spokesman for the Inspector General has declined to comment. Now, McCabe does give a comment now that he's fired. This is the original story itself, or this is the one that comes out today. Sessions fires McCabe before he can retire. Now, some people are making the point that that's somewhat spiteful because he only had 2 days on the force left over. Here's the thing. Because of what's taken place with McCabe, a lot is being made. Because of what's taking place with McCabe, a lot is being made with this idea of politicization of the FBI. So Comey has spoke his piece, McCabe has spoke his piece, other people who are associated with the FBI spoke their piece. All of them essentially making this same statement of, you guys are politicizing the FBI. We're going to stand in our power. These men are just great men. They just have their head to the grindstone. They don't look at the politics of this stuff. You guys are putting things on these people, these great men and women who are doing a hard and decent job. You're putting politics on them. And these guys don't function from the standpoint of politics. They just function from the standpoint of evidence. Okay. Now, if this was pre-2016, you may be able to make that case to a large number of the American public, and the American public may believe you. But you have a problem. They don't believe you now. For all the protestations of the people who are saying, stop politicizing the FBI, the reality of it is, the politicization of the FBI didn't happen because Donald Trump tweeted mean things to Andrew McCabe. The politicization of the FBI happened because of the FBI. It was the FBI itself. It wasn't, you may add the Justice Department, you may add in the Obama administration, but for all intents and purposes, the thing that tarnished the FBI, the reason why all of these people are looking at the FBI with a certain amount of skepticism now, is for all intents and purposes, goes back to the inception of letting Hillary Clinton walk. I'm going to make this argument that says it starts there. Now, you may find other cases, but I'm talking about in this specific instance, with the American public itself looking at the FBI with a certain amount of skepticism, it starts there. To make my point clear. So, let's start here. If you remember, it's 2016, we're on the campaign trail. Bernie Sanders is down in electoral votes. Now, a lot of Bernie Sanders supporters would not necessarily openly say this because they don't want to seem like assholes. But there were a lot of us who were hoping that Hillary Clinton get perp walked because we wanted Bernie Sanders to be president of the United States. Now, I am not ashamed of saying that. I will say that. I will honestly say that. But that being said, whether I wanted her to be perp walked or not in order to allow Sanders to get past or get through, kind of besides the point. She should have been perp walked. It's aside from what I want. It's aside from what anyone else wants. If the FBI is going to have a standard, meaning if you're going to have these institutions, and these institutions look at us as human beings equally, blind justice. It's not necessarily being selective. It's not giving one policy for one and creating another standard for somebody else for some other reason. It's blind justice. It's there, blindfold, weighing the scales. Now, if your institution is not doing that, then you can understand that the public will lose a certain amount of faith with your institution. If it is demonstrated, which I would say it is, for the rest of the public, they think that you let that woman off. They think that the FBI did something in the case with Hillary Clinton that would not have done for any other American citizen, at least not the 99% of American citizens walking around today. You can understand that showing favoritism in that way makes it look as if the FBI was being used as a political tool. And my contention is the FBI was being used as a political tool. And all of the sources that I'm using here are just open. You can find them: CNN, Washington Post, everything else. The case kind of makes itself. Let's take a look at the first thing. Sanders supporters hold it bated breath. Comey comes out for a testimony. He talks for about 5-6 minutes, and then he finally gets to the crux of it. And Comey says the following.
We do assess that hostile actors gained access.
One second, just want to make sure. Okay.
To the private commercial email accounts of people with whom Secretary Clinton was in regular contact from her personal account. We also assess that Secretary Clinton's use of a personal email domain was both known by a large number of people and readily apparent. She also used her personal email extensively while outside the United States, including sending and receiving work-related emails in the territory of sophisticated adversaries. Given that combination of factors, we assess it is possible that hostile actors gained access to Secretary Clinton's personal email account. So that's what we found. Finally, with respect to our recommendation to the Department of Justice. In our system, the prosecutors make the decisions about whether charges are appropriate based on evidence that the FBI helps collect. Although we don't normally make public our recommendations to the prosecutors, we frequently make recommendations and engage in productive conversations with prosecutors about what resolution may be appropriate given the evidence. In this case, given the importance of the matter, I think unusual transparency is in order. Although there is evidence of potential violations of the statutes regarding the handling of classified information, our judgment is that no reasonable prosecutor would bring such a case. Prosecutors necessarily weigh a number of factors before deciding whether to bring charges. There are obvious considerations like the strength of the evidence, especially regarding intent. Responsible decisions also consider the context of a person's actions and how similar situations have been handled in the past. In looking back at our investigations into the mishandling or removal of classified information, we cannot find a case that would support bringing criminal charges on these facts. All the cases prosecuted involved some combination of clearly intentional and willful mishandling of classified information or vast quantities of information exposed in such a way as to support an inference of intentional misconduct or indications of disloyalty to the United States or efforts to obstruct justice. We do not see those things here.
In that moment, Comey just changed the standard. Comey just changed the standard. And Comey is not being completely honest in that moment. For example, he makes the contention that there are no cases that can be brought for such a thing. Meaning no reasonable prosecutor would do this. And not only no reasonable prosecutor would do this, that there have been no cases that would support such a thing taking place. What about this case? What about that case? Peak FBI corruption? Meet Brian Nishimura, found guilty for removal and retention of classified materials. In a scandalous announcement, FBI Director James Comey announced moments ago that although there is evidence of potential violations of the statutes regarding the handling of classified information, and gave excessive evidence of just that. Our judgment is that no reasonable prosecutor will bring such a case. He added that prosecutors necessarily weigh a number of factors before bringing charges. There are obvious considerations, like the strength of the evidence, especially regarding intent. Responsible decisions also consider the context of a person's actions and how similar situations have been handled in the past. What is shocking is that the FBI director was clearly ignoring the U.S. Code itself. When in section 793 subsection F, gathering, transmitting, or losing defense information, it makes it quite clear that intent is not a key consideration in the case, like when deciding to press charges. And fact is, beyond that point, what is even more shocking is that according to Comey, we cannot find a case that would support bringing criminal charges on these facts. Well, we did. Here is the FBI less than a year ago charging one Brian Nishimura, 50, of Folsom, who pled guilty to unauthorized removal or retention of classified materials without malicious intent. In other words, precisely what the FBI alleges Hillary Clinton did. Now, you can see the problem. Comey has just looked into the camera, gave a very large press conference, and told a fib. He told an outright lie to the American public. He was not being truthful. Now, under normal circumstances, we're told, at least from the FBI standpoint or a criminal standpoint, when you're lying, that is consciousness of guilt. So what is Comey consciously guilty of? Or what is he trying to hide? What is he aware of? This, mind you, this is not anybody talking about the FBI. This is the very act of exonerating somebody who was clearly guilty and who you've prosecuted people just a year prior for the exact same charges. It looks like you guys are monkeying around with the system, allowing some people to have certain advantages while other people don't. Brian Nishimura didn't get this extra level or this extra yardage that you gave Hillary Clinton, this extra bar that needed to be met. Why didn't Brian Nishimura get that extra bar? Why did Hillary Clinton get that extra bar? Where she's now sitting pretty, walking around and everything else, and Brian Nishimura was actually in prison. That looks shady. That looks shady. Let's keep going with this. Then we're stuck with Comey having to explain himself to Trey Gowdy on this.
There was nothing marked classified on her emails either sent or received. Was that true?
That's not true. There were a small number of portion markings on, I think, 3 of the documents.
Secretary Clinton said, I did not email any classified material to anyone on my email. There is no classified material. Was that true?
There was classified material emailed.
Secretary Clinton said she used just one device. Was that true?
She used multiple devices during the 4 years of her term as Secretary of State.
Secretary Clinton said all work-related emails were returned to the State Department. Was that true?
No, we found work-related emails, thousands, that were not returned.
Secretary Clinton said neither she nor anyone else deleted work-related emails from her personal account. Was that true?
That's a harder one to answer. We found traces of work-related emails on devices or in Slack space, whether they were deleted or whether when a server was changed out, something happened to them. There's no doubt that there were work-related emails that were removed electronically from the email system.
Secretary Clinton said her lawyers read every one of the emails and were overly inclusive. Did her lawyers read the email content individually?
No.
Well, in the interest of time, and because I have a plane to catch tomorrow afternoon, I'm not going to go through any more of the false statements, but I am going to ask you to put on your old hat. False exculpatory statements, they are used for what?
Well, either for a substantive prosecution or for evidence of intent in a criminal prosecution.
Exactly. Intent and consciousness of guilt, right? Secretary Clinton.
Intent and consciousness of guilt. Comey said it himself. Intent and consciousness of guilt. Why would Comey fib in the last clip that I played? He's clearly fibbing. If you can find one case when Comey said there are no cases, then he's clearly not telling the truth. Not to mention, again, setting this bar of intent that he just kind of created out of whole cloth. Evidence of guilt or intent. Let's keep going. And then there's the indignity of this clip where Comey is explaining how the Justice Department under the Obama administration is forcing him to speak in a language that's closer in line with what the language of the Clinton campaign is. Meaning Loretta Lynch is trying to push him to speak in a way that's not indicative of reality. She wants him to talk as if he's part of the Clinton campaign, meaning the language that she used, she wanted him, that language, to fit what Clinton was saying. Comey makes this point of, well, no, it's not a matter. It's a criminal investigation. That woman could be arrested. She could be locked up. She could have been locked up if there was a real investigation. Let's listen to Comey. Again, explain how Loretta Lynch was pushing him to give false statements. Or let's say, not necessarily the most truthful statements.
Stories and news accounts, without having to go into all the names and the specific times and to be able to dip into all that. Have there been news accounts about the Russia investigation, about collusion, about this whole event, or accusations that as you read the story, you were stunned about how wrong they got the facts?
Yes, there have been many, many stories purportedly based on classified information about lots of stuff, but especially about Russia, that are just dead wrong.
I was interested in your comment that you made as well, that the president said to you, if there were some satellite associates of his that did something wrong, it would be good to find that out. That the president seemed to talk to you specifically on March the 30th and say, I'm frustrated that the word is not getting out that I'm not under investigation. But if there are people that are in my circle that are, let's finish the investigation. Is that how you took it as well?
Yes, sir. Yes.
And then you made a comment earlier about the Attorney General, previous Attorney General, asking you about the investigation on the Clinton emails, saying that you've been asked not to call it an investigation anymore, but to call it a matter. And you had said that confused you. Can you give us additional details on that?
Well, it concerned me because we were at the point where we had refused to confirm the existence, as we typically do, of an investigation for months. And it was getting to a place where that looked silly because the campaigns were talking about interacting with the FBI in the course of our work. The Clinton campaign at the time was using all kinds of euphemisms, security review, matters, things like that for what was going on. We were getting to a place where the Attorney General and I were both going to have to testify and talk publicly about it. And I wanted to know, was she going to authorize us to confirm we had an investigation? And she said, yes, but don't call it that, call it a matter. And I said, why would I do that? And she said, just call it a matter. And again, you look back in hindsight, you think, should I have resisted harder? I just said, all right, this isn't a hill worth dying on. And so I just said, okay, the press is going to completely ignore it. And that's what happened. When I said, we have opened a matter, they all reported the FBI has an investigation open. And so that concerned me because that language tracked the way the campaign was talking about the FBI's work. And that's concerning.
It gave the impression that the campaign was somehow using the same language as the FBI because you were handed the campaign language and told to be able to use the campaign language.
And again, I don't know whether it was intentional or not, but it gave the impression that the Attorney General was looking to align the way we talked about our work with the way a political campaign was describing the same activity, which was inaccurate.
He said it gave the impression. It's not an impression. God damn it. Come on. You have a Democratic president. That Democratic president chooses an Attorney General, Loretta Lynch. Do you believe that Loretta Lynch is going to be allied with the Democratic president, or do you think she's just going to be this kind of innocuous thing that doesn't necessarily have a political objective in the thing? No. Obama put her in. She's going to look for Democratic interests. Yes, she told you to call it a matter because she wanted to tilt the governmental apparatus itself in order to assist one of the other campaigns. This is a major deal. And the press didn't necessarily jump on this as much as they did. The very next question should have been, what else? Has there been any other communications between you and Loretta Lynch where you felt, uncomfortable, especially within regards to the Clinton investigation. That they should have dug into that. That particular point means that the Attorney General herself, who again was appointed by Democratic President Obama, was leaning on an apparatus that is supposed to be impartial and not supposed to have a dog in it. Now, the framework of government itself, it's not a real thing. It's a conceptual thing, but it exists purely because we allow it to exist. We agree to the tenets. When something is broken in one of the tenets, we fix that particular thing. We support those structures. There are people that are in there in those particular structures. The government doesn't necessarily work, however, if the people in those structures just kind of don't necessarily do what they're supposed to do in those situations. Meaning, how can I say this? Let me say it this way. You had a system that she should have been perp-walked. I mean, when it comes down to it, she should have been perp-walked. Fact is, the apparatus itself should be impartial. It shouldn't necessarily have a dog in it. It shouldn't necessarily lean in a particular way. The political parties themselves are not the government. That's what I was trying to get at, and I lost myself in the weeds. The political parties themselves are not the governments. No party in a political race have carte blanche or have any claim whatsoever on the government until they actually win that election. Comey should not have been asked to say anything other than what Comey was going to say on that investigation. Loretta Lynch should not have told him to talk like he was talking for Hillary Clinton campaign, because the government itself is not supposed to have a dog in the hunt. It is not supposed to lean in a particular direction. It is a massive deal that she did that, and the press just kind of gave that a My point here in showing this video is, not only did Comey say something that wasn't true, he also came behind and explained all of the lies that were associated with Hillary Clinton, meaning all of the times that Hillary Clinton lied talking about the email case. So Comey wasn't necessarily telling the truth when he did that particular piece. I mean, like I said, the moment that you find a case that disproves what he's saying, then you've disproved what he was saying. Immediately after that, you have a case of Comey being cross-examined and essentially, yes, owning up to, yes, she lied a lot. She lied a lot to us. Where Trey Gowdy trying to get the point across, when people are lying to you, why are they lying? They're cognizant of their guilt. That's the point that he's trying to get at. And in this case, being pushed in a particular way to talk about the case in alignment with one of the campaigns. If you're asking why are people suspicious of the FBI, this is why people are suspicious of the FBI. This has nothing to do with the politicians. This is everything to do with you guys, the FBI itself. Let's keep going. The public itself, when asked whether or not Clinton should have been prosecuted, most voters believe that she broke the law. The majority. The decent majority. So right off the bat, you can see the problem. Somebody who the public believed was guilty, that the FBI did an investigation on, and found her not guilty, while at the same time having found other people guilty of the exact same crime that she was charged with. Not to mention, add on top the thing of the Democratic Attorney General pushing the FBI to speak in a particular language about the case. Let's keep going. There's more. Congressional investigation found irregularities in FBI's handling of the Clinton email case. Republicans on key congressional committees say they have uncovered irregularities and contradictions inside the FBI's probe of Hillary Clinton's email server. For the first time, investigators say they have secured written evidence that the FBI believes there was evidence that some laws were broken when former Secretary of State and her top aides transmitted classified information through the insecure private email server, lawmakers and investigators told The Hill. The evidence included passages in FBI documents stating the sheer volume of classified information that flowed through Clinton's insecure emails was proof of criminality, as well as an omission of false statements by one key witness in the case, the investigators said. I'm not going to go through the entire piece because this piece is extremely long, But they're making a point that the way they handle cases, the way they handled the Clinton case was fundamentally different than the way they would handle a typical case like this. They're trying to show you oddities in the way this case was being handled. Let's see, where's the other one? And one last point in this. I think it's a CNN article. Strikes. So you get into FBI agent Stroitz. Stroitz is interesting because Stroitz is the one that changed the language on Clinton's. Here we are. A former top counterintelligence expert at the top of expert and the FBI, now at the center of a political uproar for exchanging private messages that appeared to mock President Donald Trump, changed a key phrase from FBI Director James Comey's description of how former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton handled classified information, according to U.S. officials familiar with the matter. Electronic records show Peter Strzok's, who led the investigation of Hillary Clinton's private email server as the #2 official in the counterintelligence division, changed Comey's earlier draft language describing Clinton's action as grossly negligent to extremely careless, the sources said. The difference between those were criminal charges. The difference between that was a criminal charge. Strzok was also instrumental in getting the case on Donald Trump. The point I'm getting at here is, and I'm going to end it on this, I'm not going to keep this long. It's not about Donald Trump mean tweeting McCabe. This has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with that particular case. You had the entire public looking at that particular case, and the majority of the public knowing that that woman is guilty, at least in their minds, knowing that that woman is guilty. Having the FBI had prior cases where they've convicted people on the exact same thing, and in a broad, outspoken way, let her off. She walks. It shows that there's a different rule for one versus the other. If a kid is walking down the street and gets caught with pot, that kid is going to jail. Hillary Clinton can mess around with a private email server, not to mention monetize the State Department, and Hillary Clinton is going to walk. You find out later that Comey didn't even do an investigation. Or he did an investigation, but to add insult to injury, he hadn't talked to Hillary Clinton. He had drafted the language of the document saying that he was going to let her off before he even talked to Hillary Clinton and many of the other witnesses that were pertinent to the investigation itself. When Republicans are looking at this and they're saying, that's weird. How do you draft a notice clearing the person before you even talk to the person? How do you do that? I understand that there are probably some decent, hard-working people at the FBI. And I understand that not all of those people are being politicized, meaning the agency itself, the entirety of the agency is not necessarily a political organ. But the people at the top of that agency, yes, they have been dealt with political matters. And I have to be honest, you have this large showing where that woman should have been perp walked and you let her go. You can understand that the public is going to look at you with a certain amount of skepticism, especially when the person who let her go is giving hate tweets to Donald Trump and is instrumental in getting Donald Trump hooked up with the FISA thing. My point is, people seeing the FBI in a particular way is because of the FBI. It's not because of anyone else. That's my point. Let's see. Who's here? And there we are. There are people here. I didn't think anyone was be here today, if I'm being honest. I feel that aside from conservative positions on social issues, Gowdy was one of the good ones. Looking at his committee's work, he has always seemed genuinely driven by right and wrong. So I don't know Gowdy's social policies. He's a Republican, so I'm assuming his policies are rather ghastly. Good at questioning. Really good at questioning. And questioning in like almost like a prosecutor. Like he eviscerated what Comey was saying. I mean, he's essentially had Comey saying two different things. Yes, the woman is innocent, but yes, she also lied all of these times with this idea of cognizance of guilt. Yeah, agreed. What is this? Oh, Primal. Thank you. 1043. James Comey tweets, Trump, Mr. President, the American people will hear my story very soon and they can judge for themselves who is honorable and who is not. And who is not. Primal. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Wesley Walker Jr. Oh, Wesley. I'm sorry, brother. I can't stay for a live show. I will watch later when I'm not busy. Thank you, Wesley. Thank you, Wesley. You're always appreciated. Wesley gave a magnificent donation, and I have to be honest, I don't necessarily know how to take it. Like, I don't know how to I don't know how to process it. But thank you, guys. And I may not see it when I'm doing my videos, but I do try to call it out. I appreciate all the super chats, the PayPals, all of that stuff. Liking my videos, sharing my videos. You guys are absolutely appreciated. I mean, for all intents and purposes, there's no way to really have a good, decent show if you don't have people showing up for that particular show. And if there were no one to watch, what would be the point? So, thank you guys very much. A militarized state is around the corner, and what happened before we realize it. Darlene Troyce. You know what's? I have to be honest. I'm more scared of a large scale war. Yeah, I'm more terrified of a large scale war. We are ramping up, and this stuff with Britain does not look good. I mean, Britain at this moment could invoke NATO powers if they wanted to. Now, they haven't had an investigation. They don't know who did it. They just pointed the finger to Russia. Russia did it. Russia does everything. Russia did it. Russia did it. That seems to be the mantra for this day and age. No, this is slightly terrifying. This is slightly terrifying. Jamal, did you catch the B and Julian Assange stream with Kim.com, Susie Dawson, and Elizabeth Voss yesterday? I did not catch it yesterday. I did not. I heard about it. I heard it was good, though. I heard it was good. This whole Russia thing is just theater to distract us. It's so obvious. Alan B., I agree with you. Look, the problem is everyone has a dog in the hunt. That's what it boils down to. Even us. Even us. I mean, there is no objective absolute. You know, there's no absolute filter in the way that you look at the world. You're always going to look at the world through some kind of lens. In their case, I think either, and there are two things at work. There's a bias and there's wishful thinking. Both of those things are kind of working with Democrats. The bias in this case is they hate Donald Trump. I hate Donald Trump. We hate his guts. We get up in the morning, gritting out teeth. We hate his guts. They hate his guts. So anything that you say bad about him is going to stick to him. So the moment that they bring up Russia, they don't have to use critical thinking skills at that point. They just find any and everything dealing with Russia that they can throw at Donald Trump and say, see, Russia plant, Russia plant. They're motivated to do it just because they dislike him. That's one point. The second point on this, they don't have a paradigm of the world to explain how Hillary Clinton could lose to reality shows. They don't get it. So for their standpoint, again, they look at it from the standpoint of there had to have been help. Russia. It had to have been Russia. He couldn't have beat her on her own. You know, he couldn't beat her just because she was a horrible candidate. No, it had to be something else. They're looking for something else to make sure their understanding of the world is intact, while at the exact same time being motivated to go with the stuff because they hate Donald Trump. Anything that you say positive about Donald Trump or anything that you push back on the Russia stuff, their first thought is, oh, you must like Trump. No, those two things aren't connected. Those things are only connected in your head. You can look at the situation and dislike Donald Trump while at the same time looking at the Russia stuff and consider it nonsense. Russia hacked us. Russia motivated Greenpeace. Russia motivated Bernie Sanders supporters. Russia motivated... They've had no influence in our election. And yet this hysteria has gone on for 2 years. My fear is this spreads to Britain with the spy stuff. Now, I've made the point that if Theresa May can't show evidence that that spy is actually injured or that spy went down or the chemical that took that spy down, then she should not be believed. And I don't take that position because somebody made it look like I think they got the impression I was talking to Theresa and was on a false flag. No, that's not what I was saying at all. I'm making the point that governments lie. That's the only point that I'm making. Is Britain capable of doing that? Yes. Is that the case that's taking place right now? I have no idea. Is it possible that another state actor was at work in this? Yes. I mean, all sorts of options are on the table. Like, they're assuming that a chemical belongs to Russia. That's what makes me so suspicious about this. It's the immediate assumption. It means that the investigation is not the point. Pointing the finger is the point, which makes me think that this is done for some kind of obfuscation reasons, ideally or probably because of Brexit. They don't have an answer. But that being said, something did happen to that spy. Something did happen to the kid. My point is, we don't know. There are multiple state actors, and I would guarantee you that there are more state actors than Russia that has that particular chemical. That's assuming that that's the actual chemical that Theresa May is even talking about. Nobody else has seen it. We need to be less reactive. I guess that's my point. If the goal is to figure out what happened, the best tool to figure out what happened is called an investigation. If your prime minister is not willing to have an investigation, if your prime minister is not willing to actually show evidence of what she's saying, then you shouldn't believe her. You don't even have to take that extra step of whether it was a false flag or whether it was a state actor or something like that. You just know something fishy is going on because she's not showing the evidence. Either she doesn't have it, or it's not what she says it is. Either she doesn't have it, it's not what she says it is. Yeah. All right, I'm not going to keep this one long. Oh, Amanda. Thank you, Amanda. Amanda Manole. Thank you, Amanda. I appreciate it. Jeffrey Parson. Reality show host looks at the world in terms of ratings. That is what the Democratic Party dismissed. The Brits want a Russia boogeyman to overturn Brexit. Mr. Spinks. Yes. Yes. That's my point. I don't think people realize how much of a problem the Brexit thing is. That's a big fucking deal. Like, people in the United States, we don't get it. That border thing was an actual conflict. That was like almost a civil war going back and forth. So you're in the situation of, okay, we don't want to go back to where we were before. And this Brexit deal does not seem to have an option to allow us to prevent that. And lo and behold, this Des Machina, or this hand of God, Russia did it. Let's not focus on Brexit now. Let's just focus on Russia. It worked in the United States. I always say Britain is only a shade lighter than the United States. Well, there you are. You got your Russiagate. Just be skeptical. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. Stoner Corso. What's worse, a government that takes violent retribution against political enemies, or a government that frames another government by doing something just as evil? The answer, it's all fucked up. It is. Yeah, it's all fucked up. It's all fucked up. Orthidium. There's a fucking ton of money invested into creating new conflicts. Well, you can imagine, yeah. I mean, think of how much money goes into weapons and Cold Wars. Think of all the jobs you can get if you have another Cold War. Think of all the weapons manufacturers. We already spend $1 trillion on weapons, on military. Think of how much additional money that they can put into military, while at the same time people in the country starve or subsystems, meaning not necessarily having adequate systems or access to the things that they need. But we have more money for weapons. Cold War would be profitable for some, but understand that's... Look, the leadership is getting worse and worse, meaning the people who are taking the reins of power is getting worse and worse. And the architecture of the government itself is getting more frayed and decrepit. This is kind of my point with this investigation. Hillary Clinton should not have walked. If you had an honest political system, that woman should not have walked. Now, I don't like people going to prison under normal circumstances. We have 5% of the world's population, with 25% in our prisons. So we have far too many people in prisons, and most of those people are in prisons for drug crimes and so forth. But in this case, you have a rule on the book that you've applied to somebody else. Clinton comes up, and you give her a pass, creating this extra hurdle that you want her to jump in order to convict. Not to mention the guy who gets a warrant on Trump is the same guy that changes the language for Clinton. The FBI's issue is with the FBI. That's what the FBI's issue is with. If people are looking at the FBI in a particular way, it's because of that case. That case is overwhelming and damning from the standpoint of credibility if you're talking about the FBI. I mean, come on. I'm talking about the farce of people we don't trust coming up with an answer when we're supposed to trust you're missing the bigger picture. Pentagon loses trillions of dollars a year. They lost $15 trillion in 2015. $5 trillion, I'm sorry. $5 trillion in 2015. It's amazing. What's happening to red economics? Yeah. All right, guys. I'm not going to keep this one too long. I do have another one coming up, but Jamal, on a scale of 1 to 10, in your opinion, how close are we to a real catastrophic conflict? I will take the opinion of the nuclear scientists. They moved the clock 2 minutes to midnight. That is the closest it has been since, if I'm not mistaken, the Cold War. You can make an argument that it's worse than the Cold War. Look, we get propaganda, and I'll end it on this. I was looking up propaganda yesterday from Russian side and from, I was curious about how do they disseminate propaganda during the Soviet Union? Like, what was the mechanism? What did it look like to them? Because I would wager that it looked a lot like it does to us. Regardless of the system that you're living under, if you live under any system, I would almost guarantee you that you would, to some degree, based on the indoctrination of the system itself, support that system and try to preserve that particular system. And you would make changes for the better or for the worse within that system and context until you get to a particular point, making these minute changes. That's assuming that the people in there are fair and even actors. People aren't necessarily fair and even actors. The Soviet Union had a certain amount of propaganda that it would give to its citizenry to cover up some of its foibles. But the West does the exact same thing. I was watching a propaganda video about propaganda. This is fucking awesome. John F. Kennedy tried to kill Castro. He tried to kill Castro a few times. Multiple times, actually. I think it was hundreds of attempts. Castro, fearing for his life, elicited help with the Soviet Union. And they were happy to help. And they put missiles in Cuba. Now, the thing is, I don't remember fully if the United States remembered whether or not those missiles were there. I think they thought they were just blockading them, not realizing those missiles were already there. But I think they did find out they were already there. They were going to do a missile strike or airstrike. Khrushchev had given the command that if they strike, you are to launch. The end of the world. That's what you're talking about. Now, you had Kennedy, who decided to go for a blockade as opposed to doing what the military commanders wanted, because the military commanders were sitting there having these conversations about losing part of the population. We need to take our hits, but we can obliterate them. Think about that. That's the stuff that these guys are talking about. That's why military men are not in command, and how worrying it is that these guys are around Trump in the way that they are. Kennedy decided not to do that because he didn't necessarily want to get into a nuclear war. By the same token, Kennedy is also stuck with a certain amount of escalation, meaning reciprocal escalation. When one does something, the other does something in response. Britain gets rid of the diplomats. Russia turns around to get rid of British diplomats. It's a reciprocal response. Same thing with missile strikes, though. The response will be an automatic. These guys thought that this was the end of things. Like, at a certain point, the public was celebrating, but the missiles were already in Cuba. The blockade, just because the Soviet ships turned back around, the missiles were already in Cuba. Those missiles could have struck at any time. And they were at an impasse on how to get those missiles removed. They thought it was going to be the end of the world. Now, in this case, you have the political acumen of John F. Kennedy, and you have Khrushchev, who, for all of his bluster, did not want to end the world. He was somewhat panicked in the response and the message that he sent to the White House. The key point, though, is not the first message, which was Khrushchev, the second message. The first message was a human being realizing, oh my God, we need to pull this back. This has gone too far. The second message were the hardliners telling Kennedy to go fuck himself, for all intents and purposes. I'm paraphrasing. At a certain point, it doesn't matter what the human element wants to do. Reciprocal actions take hold. Meaning, it is easier to be strong than it is to be weak. A leader would automatically go towards this idea of strength as opposed to taking a position that makes them look weak. So, you end up with leaders who don't have any political acumen whatsoever. Putin has political acumen. Donald Trump has none. And these are the guys who have their fingers on the button. We have troops in Syria as we speak, literally, illegally, in Syria as we speak, having operations near Russian troops. Syria and Russia are in an alignment. Russia has already said that the United States is planning a false flag attack, in which case they will respond if Damascus is attacked. Yeah, I'll leave that to the nuclear scientists. I mean, the countries in the NATO borders have been bumping up their military expenditures. The United States has been pushing them to bump up their military expenditures. And you have this Russia hysteria going on in the United States that's becoming somewhat xenophobic, if we're being honest. They're denigrating an entirety of a race. It's like, what does it mean to be a Russian when people are saying the Russians? What does that mean? I don't know what that means. How many Russians are there? What does that mean? They're denigrating the entirety of a race over some kind of political shit that Hillary Clinton pulled. And yet they do it nonetheless. Had no impact on the election at all, and yet they do it nonetheless. Despite us intervening into all these other campaigns into these countries around the world. We are in their country illegally. Would I put it past Donald Trump or the military commanders to be brash and brazen enough to attack Damascus? No, I don't put it past them. Does that mean that Vladimir Putin will respond? Yes, he will. He has to. He has no choice but to. He has no choice but to. At a certain point, it just becomes this kind of reciprocal thing where one side necessitates the action of the other side. Both sides can point saying the other person started it, but it doesn't really matter. At that point, both of them are just responding to each other, what each other does. Good thing Khrushchev and Kennedy weren't impetuous like Trump. Yeah, that's my point. You're seeing my point. I think you're seeing my point. Look, you can make a case that Kennedy got us into the missile crisis. You can make a case that both of them got us into the missile crisis. Them fucking around with this Cold War shit. Either way, neither one of them wanted to end the world. And just because they didn't want to end the world doesn't necessarily mean that they still would not have ended up ending the world. I don't know if Donald Trump wants to end the world. I would assume Donald Trump doesn't want to end the world. But does he have the political acumen to not fuck up? I don't believe that. I believe he's an incompetent reality show host. He's president of the United States, unfortunately. And now we have this situation where we are getting closer and closer into a conflict with a nuclear power nation. A nuclear power nation has hypersonic nuclear weapons, apparently. Hypersonic nuclear weapons. It's fucking amazing. Lauren, it's probably true, but the stupidity of pompous politicians cannot be understated. The militaristic fervor is the cheapest way to score domestic points. It's ultimately a slippery slope. I have a video that's going to come up on Corbin because I want to talk about that. That very specific issue. Because this is where leftists often take the hit. They usually turn to the right. Somebody's going to have to go through the door. And I think that's going to be Jeremy Corbyn. I know that sounds weird, and I know that sounds somewhat more epic than probably what it is. What I mean by that is, when hysteria comes up that pings on the person's lizard brain, and they're not necessarily thinking about the wider ramifications of what's taking place, it is easy to move to the right on that because, again, looking tough scores points. The problem with that is, looking tough also emboldens the other person to look tough. You guys are just out there saber rattling at that point, which makes it more likely, not less likely, for an actual conflict to take place. If the point is not to have conflict, then the point is to allow enough face to be saved where each side can pull back from the brink with saving face. And beyond that, to not automatically pull to the right. You can take actions to defend your country without necessarily taking these bombastic, hostile actions that Theresa May has taken. If you honestly believe that another country has poisoned somebody in your country, there are policies and procedures that these guys are supposed to go through. They threw it out the window. Scoffed at anybody for even bringing it up. We don't give a shit about laws. Fuck laws. Fuck laws. We have a clear idea on what we want this to be, and this, so we're just going to will it into being. You need to take our word for it. Don't take our word for it. There were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. There were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. There were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Alright guys, I'm going to end this. I have another video, maybe 1 or 2 videos coming up, so hope you guys can stick around, and I'll see you in a few minutes. Alright guys, if you enjoy the content, feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support the Patreon. Thanks everyone. And once again, Primal, thank you man. Wesley Walker Jr., again, thank you. I appreciate it. And Amanda Minol. Thank you, Amanda. All right, guys. You have a good one. I'll see you guys in probably about 10, 15 minutes.